Once we get into the growing season, we always advise farmers do some plant tissue analysis on your farm. Soil testing is something that's commonly done in the spring or the fall, but this plant tissue analysis can be done during the season. We advise people to do it once a week, at least in a few spots in a few fields. It doesn't take that much time, but if you have this information, it really helps you address your in-season fertility needs.
One of the big questions we've been getting this year is about nitrogen. For some areas, there were huge amounts of rain, there was delayed planting. Fall applied nitrogen, farmers are just figuring there's a bunch of that may be lost or pushed down a little deeper in the soil. My crop's not going to be able to get to it in time. For spring applications, could be the same worries. So for many farmers across the country, let's take some plant tissue analysis right now to see what I need for nitrogen, because in crops like corn and wheat, for example, that are heavy nitrogen users, you may need to get right back out there and put some more nitrogen on.
So whether we're talking corn, soybeans, or wheat, there are three different methods of application. And especially for corn and soybeans, where we have wider rows, a farmer can inject that nitrogen and actually put it into the soil. That's very difficult to do with wheat. With wheat and with corn and soybeans also, a farmer will either foliar feed or just dribble nitrogen on top of the ground. Like in wheat, for example, we run stream bars on our farm, so we've got these streams dropping down to the ground. In corn and soybeans, we've commonly drug hoses that can drag right along the surface of the soil, laying that nitrogen on top of the ground. Now, obviously, if you're going to do something like that and you're going to put a fair amount of nitrogen out there, you want to use a nitrogen stabilizer with it, number one. And number two, you're really hoping for rain pretty soon.
Well, we'll see a lot of farmers look at the forecast. They see, hey, we got an 80% chance of rain tonight starting after 10. Well, guess what? We're going to be putting on as much nitrogen as we can, get as many acres covered as we possibly can, because we're going to get some rain to wash that down into the soil. Now, that wouldn't be true of things like P and K. If you're putting out phosphorus, potassium, they don't move very much with water down into the soil. So, it's a different thing. If we can inject those, if at all possible, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, you could do some foliar feeding like with potassium. With phosphorus, we just don't see that moving through the leaves and into the plant very well. That you really need to inject in the soil and get lots of moisture to get it into the crop.
The other disadvantage with the foliar applications is you just can't put many nutrients on total. For example, we might side dress in our corn. Well, we do side dress in our corn, and sometimes we'll put on 50 to even 100 pounds of nitrogen in one shot as a side dress. We might do the same thing in wheat. We might put on 50 pounds in soybeans, but all that is either injecting or dragging a hose or stream barring. When we talk about foliar feeding, we can only get a few pounds of nitrogen out there, and I know there are many people that talk about, oh, these foliar fertilizers have so many more pounds and it's so much more available. Well, it may be more available and it may have a few more pounds, but there's no way you're going to get 50 pounds in one application of a foliar feed. Plus the fact, if you were to try to get 50 pounds out there, you'd really burn that crop. So all you can do with foliar feeding is run low rates. You usually have to dilute it down with water, and generally speaking, you're going to be out there on a real regular basis every week or two.
Well, the foliar feed is really just a boost. That's what we're trying to say here. You can't totally replace your pre-emerge program with one foliar application done mid-season. It just doesn't work that way. But let's say that you had your preseason program done quite well and your early season fertility was good. Everything is great. Now your crop is, instead of 200 bushel corn that you were kind of expecting and fertilizing for, you got a shot at 220. Well, here's where a foliar can come in and help you out. Or if you had some heavy rains and you say, I'm just a little bit short, a foliar could be the boost that your crop needs.
When we talk about things other than N, P, and K, a lot of times we forget that, sulfur is really important in the plant. Micronutrients are really important in the plant. And you know what? We don't need a lot of those. We actually could foliar feed with some of those nutrients, or we could mix those nutrients together, injecting or dragging a hose or even stream barring. We've done that in all three of these crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. So I guess part of the reason why we're talking about this today, I know it's getting kind of late in the season for some farmers, but even so, we still want to look at plant tissue analysis. We want to see if our crop is short on some nutrients. And don't forget that it's not just nitrogen you can put out there. It's also P and K, but especially micronutrients and sulfur. We've seen a lot of micronutrient and sulfur deficiencies so far this year, in part due to heavy rains in some areas, in part due to really dry conditions in some areas. It does really vary. But the point is, we've got to get enough nutrients out there, and those nutrients have to be available to the plant when it needs it if we're going to get top yields. Well, once again, we're we're talking about in-season fertility here, we really strongly encourage you, do some plant tissue analysis tests as you go throughout the season. That'll help you for this season and as you tweak your fertilizer program going forward. In addition to that, don't just look at nitrogen, consider also putting some more P and K, sulfur, micronutrients, anything that your crop needs. Get some more out there. You're going to have to run with really low rates if you want to foliar feed, but you could put more on if you either inject or just lay that fertilizer right on the soil.
And while you're out scouting your fields this summer, keep an eye out for our Weed of the Week. It's actually one of the easier grasses to identify. We'll explain coming up later in the show.